Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at converting images to black and white through a gradient map adjustment layer. So first we're going to open eagle.jpg, and when this image opens, we'll see that we've got a lot of beautiful detail in this bird's feathers. And when converting to black and white, that's one of the things you really want to look for. You want to look for some nice texture and detail that can be brought out in the shadows and highlights, as well as midtones. So the first thing you're going to do is duplicate the background layer, so Command J, and then you're going to apply a gradient adjustment layer. And that is the last icon in the gradient adjustment panel. So go ahead and click the gradient map adjustment layer, and you're going to see something that you're not going to like, but I promise you this makes a beautiful black and white conversion. Now go ahead and go up and do the drop down box next to your gradient that shows up here and click through some of the different gradients that come up here, and you'll see that you can get a lot of neat like pop art effects, etc. Go ahead and reselect the top one. You'll see this gives you a very contrasty, beautiful black and white image. Now you could stop there and say, I love it, I'm done, no problem. However, we can see that by converting it to black and white, we've lost some of the detail in our shadows. And so the next thing you'll want to do is add a levels adjustment layer and go ahead and bring your midtones up just a little bit. And as you do so, what you'll see is you begin to get some of the detail back in these shadowy areas. And so if I click my levels adjustment layer on and off, you'll see the slight adjustment that's being made. Now if you felt like you needed to slide your midtones down, then you could do that as well. However, for the most part, you will always be improving visibility in your midtones, so sliding that to the left a little bit. And that just enables you to see a little bit more of these shadowed areas in the midtones. Now go back to your gradient map adjustment layer, and I would like for you to once again click the drop down next to your gradient, and then right below that you'll see a settings button. Go ahead and click that. It's a little gear looking button, and you'll see where you can load a variety of other gradients. Let's take a look at the metals gradient. So I'm going to select that. It's asking for permission. I'm going to say OK. And then you can see what happens when you go through and look at some of the different metallic options. And most of them aren't anything that you would normally use. However, the steel bar gradient is really pretty with this image. Now for 8B, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to load the photographic toning gradients, and you're going to have to select one of the photographic toned gradients. You're also going to need to go in and apply a levels adjustment and bring out the midtones, shadows, and highlights using a levels adjustment layer as well. So for 8B, you're going to have the eagle.jpg image, apply a gradient map adjustment layer from the photographic toning gradients, and then you're also going to apply a levels adjustment layer to bring out your midtones, highlights, and shadows. Generally speaking, on an image, you bump up the highlights, bump down the shadows, and bring up the midtones. When you're through making your adjustment, what you're going to do is save that. So Command Shift S or Control Shift S, select your Chapter 8 folder. You're going to name this 8B and your last name _ eagle.psd. Save it in your Chapter 8 folder and go ahead and close it out. Now, one thing that's great about adjustment layers is the fact that they can be combined like we just said. So I'm going to go ahead and reopen the Eagle PSD file that I had just done, and I'm going to discard both of my adjustment layers because I don't need those anymore, and I'm back to my original image. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and apply a black and white adjustment layer to the image. And for this one, you can see where applying some of the different sliders. He's got a yellow beak, so we know yellow is going to be a big part here. A little bit of blue. Magenta, we see not a whole lot happens when we mess with our magenta slider. Green mostly affects our background. Red, some areas of the bird are affected. And so go in and make the individual sliders where you want them to be. The next thing I'm going to do after that is I'm going to apply a gradient adjustment. So select the gradient adjustment layer icon, and then I can go in and select maybe one of these toned gradients. I'm going to select Sepia 3 and close my properties panel. Now, if I don't want to leave that at 100%, all I have to do is lower the opacity on that gradient adjustment layer, and look at how pretty that turns out. There's just the black and white, and here's with a little bit of sepia added to it. Additionally, if I turn that back up to 100%, you can look at what happens when you go through and apply different blend modes to your gradient adjustment layers. Some of them you would never use. Some of them you might use at a lowered opacity, and some of them may have just the right effect that you would like to have without any adjustments. I'm a fan of the color blend mode on this image with these two adjustment layers. It gives me almost that same effect of reducing the opacity that we saw earlier. So don't be afraid to go in and practice and utilize some of the different things you've already learned about, such as blending modes and other types of adjustment layers, and reducing the opacity of your layers, and combining some of your different effects to get a unique look to your image.